America is the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special Californication, a warning to America. I want to start off with an ancient tale, the tale of the city mouse and the country mouse. A little Aesop fable here. So a country mouse visited a relative who was in I take it back it around. The city mouse visited a relative who lived in the country mouse. And they ate roots and acorns and a little bit of water. And that was it. And the city mouse was appalled at the conditions that his cousin was living in out there in the country. And the city mouse said, come with me, come to my house in the big city. So the country mouse went to the big city and they had a feast. Oh, pastries and cheeses and anything you could possibly imagine. And then a cat came and almost ate them both up. And the country mouse ran home and said to the city mouse, you may have luxuries and delicacies that I do not, but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it. Aesop wrote that fable in the year 400 BC. And I love that story because it's thousands of years old. This city-country divide is thousands of years old. Blue state, red state, California, and the rest of this country. This divide has existed, and we need to ask ourselves continually and still today, which way do we want to go? And we will make the argument today that you do not want to go the way of California. But just to drive home this idea that this has been around for thousands of years, going back to our founding fathers as well. Thomas Jefferson, right? This is he was the country mouse. He wrote a letter to James Madison. He said, when we get piled upon one another in large cities as in Europe, we shall become corrupt as in Europe. And I'll argue today that when we follow the policies of California, we're going to become as corrupt as California, no matter where you are in this big country of ours. Jefferson wrote a letter to Benjamin Rush. He said, I view great cities as pestilence to the morals, the health, and liberties of man. True, they nourish some of the elegant arts. He's like, yeah, there may be museums there, but the useful ones can thrive elsewhere. My favorite quote of his, he said, the mobs of great cities add just so much to the support of pure government as sores do to the strength of the human body. That is to say, they don't. So I just want to share that because I'm a country guy. That's my instincts. That's my nature, as opposed to the city mouse. I would be the country mouse. Recently, we took all four of our kids, we took the whole family to New York City as a bit of an experiment, right? Give the kids a taste of the Big Apple. They're 2, 4, 6, 8 years old. And our 8-year-old said, his conclusion was, it smells bad, you can't run, and the people aren't very nice. Now, I pushed back on the people not being very nice. New Yorkers, the nice ones at least, they may have a hard shell. You can break through it though. And then when you're in, you're in. But other than that, I think my 8-year-old was pretty spot on. Today's special though, it's not necessarily city country, but it's California failing versus the rest of the country thriving. But are we going to choose the same path as California? And in many ways we are. And there's cities and therefore states all across the country that are doing the same thing. There's so many states that they're blue states, but it's really just one red city. Illinois being the big one, right? It's just Chicago being like California, taking over the city and therefore taking over the entire state. California infects the rest of the country. Our culture moves from West Coast to East Coast. Like it or not, that's the way it goes. And if Andrew Breitbart was right and politics is downstream of culture, our politics goes from West Coast to East Coast. And the politics of the West Coast is dominated by the cities in California. Now, I'm going to be totally honest here. I go back and forth on this argument that I'm going to make here today. I totally understand the argument that you want our blue cities to burn and California. You want just California? Like, listen, California, you voted for this. I hope you get what you want good and hard. Like New York City might elect to be their mayor. He just won the Democratic primary. But New York City might elect a Muslim communist from Africa to be the mayor of the largest city in America. So you're like, all right, like, what do you want me to do? You're voting for people who who want to like abolish the police and queer all the kids and have government-run grocery stores. Like, are you total psychos? Like, what can I do? I'm here in Tennessee now. And I get it. It's like, all right, go harder. Hit rock bottom faster. At this point, the only chance you have of getting out is by going down. I get that. That speaks to me. And I listen, when I was in Tennessee, the first time I was in Tennessee, my first radio job was in Tennessee after college. Then I moved to California, San Diego for 12 or 13 years. And then we moved back to Tennessee just a couple years ago. But I remember when I was first in Tennessee, we would talk about California as a crystal ball. You could go to Europe, right? What was happening in Europe was a little bit ahead of California. And then California would be a little bit ahead of the rest of the country. And I remember being in Tennessee the first time talking about California, just cut it off. Who cares? Like dig a moat around it and push it off into the ocean. Who cares about that place? So I get that. But right now, I don't think that's right. Because these places were too awesome to let fall. Maybe I had that view of like, let's let these people just get what they want. They voted for it. They can have it good and hard. I think I had that view because I didn't realize how bad a place could be. Like rock bottom is very low. And then I underestimated how long a city or state can survive at that rock bottom and last that long. And that process hurts a lot of people and it hurts all of us no matter where you are. We're the same country. It's the same country, it's still America. California's in America. Also, I don't want the communists to win. I don't want terrible people to take over our cities and take over the states of my country. Now, I used to have a similar attitude about our colleges. I would say, who cares? They can take over the Ivy League, whatever, it doesn't matter. It'll just stay in that little bubble. Well, it didn't. They took over every other college, nearly. They took over K through 12. Those kids who were in the bubble then graduated and took all their communism with them. So I used to have this live and let burn attitude of our colleges, but that burned all of us. So I can't be okay with people taking over major portions of my country. New York City, it's still my country. California, it's still part of my country. Now, I've been seeing lately, there's been popping up here and there, all these videos of like someone would be driving through the streets of New York City in 1952. Or here's Chicago in 1938. And here's LA in 1964 or whatever. And you have all these videos. Here's LA. Right. This is LA. I forget what year this is. Does it say up at the top? 1950. Okay. And all these videos are so shocking because everything just looks so nice. Everything looks nice. Everything looks nice and clean and vibrant and thriving, and people just really lovely. Like everything's really lovely. The buildings are beautiful, beautiful park. Like everything is great. Why don't our cities look like this anymore? And why are we okay with them not? And it's especially true with California. California used to be awesome. California was so popular because it was so clean, because it was so well governed. It was a beautiful place to raise a family. And now my family, we left San Diego. Imagine how bad things need to be for someone who's in San Diego to be like, I got to get out of here. That was my family and so many others. Really, friends of mine that are still in California, the people I know in California, they're stuck. Everyone I know. Now, our next guest, he's not stuck there, but everyone I know is stuck there. They have a job with a pension. So they're like, I got 7 years left or something. Or like their husband or wife has a pension, right? They're a firefighter or something. Or my whole family's here. We can't go. My sister lives down the street and my parents are, right? So they're stuck there in that way. But everyone else who I know who could leave has left. And it's stuff like this. I mean, do you remember the first, these most recent riots, I guess, in LA? There'll be more to come. But all these images of people masked up, burned out cars, waving Mexican flags, stuff like this, right? This photo stood out to me. What do you notice when you see that? There's a lot of things, a lot in this picture going on, right? The thing that got my attention on this picture is if you look in the background, on the left-hand side of your screen, see the street signs there? To the left of that, it's really like the one part of the background that's not covered in smoke, black smoke. Look at that lot, right? So first you got this old fence, the grass is all overgrown, it's just a dump. And then if you look back at the building behind it, that's just LA. You didn't see that in the 1950 drive-by of LA. So like the only thing you can really see clearly in this photo, other than the Mexican flag, is there you go. I don't see the graffiti there. The only thing you see clearly in that photo with the Mexican flag is it's just like a third world trash dump. And that's what our cities are increasingly becoming. And I don't want that to be the case anymore. I became radicalized a bit about city beautification because of this Tucker Carlson clip.
I mean, in my life, I just try to stay unaffected by the propaganda. You don't have to be a genius to do that at all. It doesn't even, I'm not a genius, that's for sure. Just look out and like, what does this look like? Drive across America for 3 hours. Is this what you remember from 5 years ago? Does it look better or worse? Are there more people sleeping on the street? Is it dirtier? Is there graffiti? Graffiti? Ooh, graffiti. Graffiti, that's not art, it's vandalism. And when it's allowed to stand, what does it say? We've given up, we don't care. We're allowing people who create nothing to destroy what we built, and we're not fighting back. Graffiti is like one step from total society collapse, period. What you're saying when you allow graffiti is we have no self-respect at all. We don't care enough about our civilization to keep it clean, to keep it pretty.
I want to fight back against these people because this is my country. We're in New York City, we went to Grand Central Station, of course. Grand Central Station is amazing. Built in 1913. It's like, what is this place? And my son, he asked why train stations aren't built like this anymore. Or no, he asked why the other way around. He asked why they were built like that in the first place. And I said, oh, because they were the entrance to the grand city. Right? You were welcoming people to someplace special. Here you are coming off this train from wherever, and now you're entering someplace important. This is a grand red carpet to our crown jewel of the greatest country in the world, New York City. Grand Central Station is so beautiful that people walk in and just take pictures of themselves standing in the middle of it. Right? It's like, that's how beautiful this thing is. Which, by the way, side story for another special, why don't we build airports that look like Grand Central Station? But anyway, that's for another day. My point is, I want to be proud of our cities again. I just don't want to give up on them. I want to be proud of California again. Alan Bloom, he wrote in the book Closing the American Mind back in 1987. It's a wonderful book. He said, we are like ignorant shepherds living on a site where great civilizations once flourished. The shepherds play with the fragments that pop up to the surface, having no notion of the beautiful structures on which they were once a part. We are living on top of the fragments of what used to be a beautiful place, California. We need to get back to this. We need to realize the beautiful structures and foundations that we used to have. And we've lost so much of it. And we need to get back to it. We lost our history, we lost our heritage, we've lost our wisdom, we've lost our cities, and I'm not going to lose a state. It's time to get back to it. I want our cities and I want California back from the lunatics. I want to make all of America great again. I want to win California. I want to go right to Mike Cernovich. Follow him on the Twitter, of course, filmmaker, author, his Substack, The Other Side of Fear. Mike, great to talk to you, brother.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Why do you love California so much?
California has more Republican voters than any other state in the country, and people will say that's based on population, but it's still a significant number of California voters. And you have everything good, and unfortunately, everything bad comes from California. It's an incubator for ideas, and people seem to forget before Ronald Reagan did the amnesty deal. So I find it always interesting how people love Ronald Reagan but hate California. And I say, well, do you know that Ronald Reagan did amnesty, and that's what turned California blue? And if Reagan hadn't done that amnesty, then California would still be a red state, right? People don't want to come to grips with that, right? What does it mean to be a conservative, and what does it mean to admire Ronald Reagan? when he's the one who gave California over to the Democrats. There, you can talk about weather and everything, but the the thing about California, which is why people call it flaky if you're not from California, is in a lot of states you grow up in, people, you can call it realistic or call it pessimistic, but if you tell them you're going to do something, you have some idea, you'll get a lot of pushback or people will be a little hater. California, you can say, you know what, I'm gonna create a new wind farm in my backyard, and your friends will say, great, sounds cool, amazing. Nobody believes you can do it. It's quite possible. Tech originated from California, aerospace, California, every major innovation, California, very little is been invented. You have Alabama, you do have some great states that still do innovation that don't get the credit they deserve. But you get all this innovation out of California. There's this mindset in California that you can do anything. To make it in California is actually it's hard. Everyone in California has the same feeling where you drive around and you just look around and you think, how are all these people able to make it in California? And then of course you wonder how you're able to make it in California. So there's a lot to be said for what happens and how your mind can change for the better in California. There's an optimism that arises when you live here long enough.
What about the future, or the past of the conservative movement that came out of California? What does conservatism owe California and California minds?
Well, if people like Reagan was the governor of California and came out of California. You have Breitbart News, it comes out of California, right? You have a lot of people like the Daily Wire that started out, that was incubated at Breitbart, right? Jeremy and Shapiro were in LA, and then it's in Tennessee now, but that all also started in California. The California, Harmeet Dillon was a lawyer in San Francisco. Everybody loves Harmeet Dillon, the work she's doing at civil rights. Okay, she's from California. So eventually you would, rather than blindly hate California and say, let it burn and surrender, like, well, why would you surrender a state where it still is 40% Republican, right? Why would you surrender the state where the only reason that we don't have more Republican congressional districts is because illegal immigrants are counted for the census, right? That's what always gets me is that California would be a Republican powerhouse if illegal immigrants weren't counted for purposes of the census. So why don't the Republicans in Congress from these other red states, right? Because everybody loves making fun of California. Langford was from Oklahoma. The amnesty deal that they tried to do under Trump was from Oklahoma. Lindsey Graham was from South Carolina. John Cornyn, Texas, right? Where's the accountability? That's why I always challenge people is I go, well, where's the accountability for you? You live in a deep red state. You can send anybody. You could send a dream candidate. And we're here in hostile territory doing our best. You live in a dream state, Oklahoma. And who are you sending? You're sending a guy who wants to do an amnesty deal. You're sending Lindsey Graham into the Senate. You're sending Tom Tillis into the Senate. But then you want to talk about how bad California is, and I think people should maybe ask why they're not sending better senators and better congressional Republicans, and then we could get this illegal immigration issue solved where they're not being counted for apportionment. And then you would look, oh wow, there's probably 5 or 10 more Republican seats in California. There's probably 5 more Republican seats in Illinois. And then we should be looking at probably 240 Republicans in Congress. Why isn't any of that being done? So I like to, maybe troll is the wrong word, but I like to taunt the California haters, even though a lot of the criticisms I obviously agree with, but it's also California is not Los Angeles, and California is not the totality of San Francisco and Los Angeles, right? People come out here, they go, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. Or people say, oh, you can't own guns. You can get concealed carry in almost every county in California. Concealed carry rate in Orange County, California, approval rate is 98.5%, right? You can't have an AR-15, okay, but you can conceal carry a Glock, and I don't know why you need much more than that for concealed carry, right, for EDC. And people go up. So I remember I'd argue with these people, and then I would prove to them everything that I'm saying, and then they kind of disappear, rather than go, oh, I guess I was was educated on the state, and I realized that.
Yeah.
They
You
don't
mentioned,
understand.
sorry, you mentioned illegal aliens, and I don't want to live in the past, but I do like to think about like what could have been and how we can still get back to this. But I always go back to Prop 187 and what a pivotal moment that was in California. Like 1994 wasn't ancient history. And 58% of people voted for a proposition that made illegal aliens, you couldn't go to school, they couldn't go to hospitals, they couldn't get $1 of welfare. It was called the Save Our State initiative. Like that was like hardcore MAGA Trump in California only back in '94. And then they're legal, and then we elected a new governor who tanked
was a judge. No,
man, what could the state have been?
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because a lot of people don't know that. Prop 187 was passed by almost 60% of the vote to deny all public benefits to illegal immigrants. An activist judge said that it was unconstitutional. This is what Trump we're dealing with right now. So if people want to bash California, that's fine. I don't cry myself to sleep over it. But we in California, we tried to save the state. And now judges are doing it at a nationwide level what happened to California. So maybe take it as a cautionary tale and do something constructive and productive rather than sit around and brood over California, a state that people don't even live in or want to live in many cases.
Can you speak to the political dynasties that California's produced from Democrats, right? And I speak to that because Kamala, we got Newsom who wants to go to DC, and now Kamala who wants to come back to California. What is it about the Democratic Party in California and their power they have now?
Well, anywhere Democrats go, because people talk about California a lot, and I feel like they should talk more about Illinois with Brandon Johnson. Illinois is probably worse than California without any of the geographic advantages. And I don't understand often why people and political people or people who are political hobbyists focus so much on California in a hateful way when there are states, Michigan, look who's Michigan got, Whitmer. What are you doing? What are you doing, Michigan? You got Whitmer up there. Minnesota, you got Tim Walz, a Marxist, Hamas sympathizer who is almost the vice president of the United States, stopped by people like me in California, by the way. What is going on in those Midwestern states? And then they have all these things to say about California, and I think, well, even if everything you say is true, at least there's good weather here, right? You have a Minnesota winter and Tim Walz. Why is that? Why do you have parts of Minneapolis, Somalia? And I mean that, I mean that with all sincerity, with people. And if you're in South Dakota, why don't you go look at Minnesota and ask them, why did you turn one of America's beautiful cities, Minneapolis, a great city, into Somalia? What NGOs were responsible for that? And the way that, of course, relates back to the California point is everywhere Democrats go, they install a corrupt political machine. Right? The Pritzker family, one of them's on the board of Harvard, Hamas Harvard, corrupt governor. If you look into, he's always talking about got to raise taxes, but in one of their houses, they removed all the toilets. That way they could try to get it reassessed as not a residence. So there was a huge taxing he had to pay back, but it was probably tax fraud, even though he's multi-billionaire and you need to pay more taxes. And all these other people in states get a pass. Like I had no idea how bad Tim Walz was until he was almost a vice president, and I thought, how did Minnesota do this? I mean, really, with all sincerity, how did you elect an outright Marxist in Minnesota? So people need to worry about a lot, and I mean that, and not in the way of brooding and ruminating, but people need to understand that there's attacks across the whole country. New York might be electing its first Marxist mayor, right? They had a choice between Cuomo, Covidian, and an outright Marxist. New York City. So are we just going to give up every time we lose? Are we just going to give up? Okay, now let's move everybody from New York. So it totally flips. Okay, let's all leave California. Okay, you all going to leave Minnesota now because of Walz? You all going to leave Michigan now because of Whitmer? We just going to abandon ship, run? That's what Republicans do now? Just run every time it gets a little hot.
Mike Cernovich, filmmaker, author. Go check out the Substack, The Other Side of Fear. What is your Twitter? It's just your last name, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I go to it regularly, so I kind of forgot what it even is. But Cernovich on the Twitter, go check that out and be on the latest with everything Mike Cernovich is doing. Mike, grateful for you, brother. Thanks for keeping up with the fight.
Pleasure, brother. Thank you.